G'day, welcome to the Takeover Footy Wrap on Takeover TV. We've got a big week of football to look at, to review, because, of course, football's going on every day of the week or every night of the week. And have a look at the crew tonight. With the crazy New York backdrop is Dr. Sergio Paradise, straight out of surgery. How are you, Serge?
I'm pretty well, gentlemen. It's good to be with you. It's good. I've had the mask on all day and I was just reluctant to take it off. But have you noticed we're walking around the streets in the mask, you can only see people's eyes. And there's been a lot of people who I reckon have seen me go, I know that. Oh, no, sorry, mate, don't know you at all. They must know with very bloodshot, puffy eyes, I reckon. But I'm going to get it off because it's pretty uncomfortable, I've got to say. But it's good to see you gentlemen here and put it back on, you reckon?
Hey, we're joking. All right, we've got a couple of great, former champs of the game. First of all, regular on Takeover TV with the Takeover Footy Wrap. How are you, big Rene Kink?
Yeah, great to be on board again this week, guys, and great to have Gary on board too. Fantastic, mate.
Can't wait to talk about your pies because they are going down quicker than the value of the US dollar. And the Gary you refer to is, it's no longer a debate. By virtue of the medal, the greatest finals footballer of all time. And also a brilliant bloke who is so invested in football, latterly with Port Melbourne, but through his time, whether it's Hawthorn, the media, coaching the Cats, you name it, always at the cutting edge. The great Gary Ayres. How are you, Ayresy?
Yeah, well, Finey. Thanks very much for that introduction, Serge, and obviously Rene as well. We had a few little tussles back in the day, the great Rene Kink. So, yeah, good to be on board for the first time. So go easy on me, boys.
Yeah, great, Gary. It was tough times on that halfback flank with you guys and our dear friend who we lost recently. What's his name? Your teammate?
Tucky's son or Kenny Judge, David O'Halloran.
David O'Halloran. What a fantastic player he was.
Yeah, he was.
Enormous, tough as nails too.
Yeah, that's certainly big left footer coming out of full back, Rene, and he certainly had to play on the bigger boys. And when you're coming up against the likes of Simon Madden and, of course, Paul Salmon resting in the forward pocket, they were big lads back in those days when you were knocking around at Essendon.
Yeah, you had your work cut out then, didn't you?
Oh, definitely. They were a powerhouse in 85.
Well, see, we've got you two there now. We've got the Incredible Hulk v. Conan. I would like to have seen an arm wrestle between you two blokes. Who would have won that, do you reckon? Easy?
Oh, well, Rene probably had a little bit more bulk than me, but...
That's right, Gary. Bulk is the right word.
I'll tell you what, at your peak, two of the sort of ideal, what we thought back then, maybe not now with all the running and all the non-contact that goes on, but the two bodies almost that you wanted in league football, weren't they, Serge? You just wish guys in your team were either like Gary or like Rene. I mean, because I tell you what, it was a pretty physical game, and these blokes very rarely came out on the wrong side of the ledger.
Oh, exactly. I mean, and also Rene being a hairdresser and Ayresy being possessing one of the great mullets in AFL history. I mean, Luke Jackson down at Melbourne has just had his cut, which as soon as I saw it last week, I thought, he's gone the Gary Ayres, the classic. The classic late 80s model.
The question I like to ask Gary is all this hub business going on. I don't know how we would have handled a hub back in our days. Had been locked away in one of those resorts somewhere in WA or Queensland. I think we could have got up to a bit of trouble, and I certainly wouldn't have gone to the hairdressers or had to go for tennis. I think some other devious issues could have happened amongst the boys and would have caused hell.
Yeah, there might have been a little bit of mischief. Yeah, there might have been a little bit of mischief, Rene. We probably would have bought the refoil out, mate, and ladded up alongside the pool and hit the gym. And
you would have asked yourself, where are all these girls come from? Where brought all these girls in?
Out of Cavill Avenue, it would have been.
Strutting around in the boardies doing our thing.
I reckon you all would have had to probably put in 50 grand before you went, knowing that you're going to get an absolute swag of fines and just cop it. There would have been sort of spottings of different people elsewhere. Somebody would have seen Platten in an ice cream parlour. The boys, Colin Robinson would have been cutting a rug somewhere at a nightclub. There would have been sightings everywhere. It would have been like gold for the AFL.
Yeah, but I think if there's anything like our trip to Thailand and those particular places back in those days, I think you would have been using more the words like goldfingers or something like that.
Imagine the drink cards back in the day, and of course there might have been a few get out of jail cards floating around too, I reckon.
Oh, yeah.
Now, Izzy, you're still coaching Port Melbourne, obviously this season's shot to death. But is that a new sponsor logo you've got on your Port jacket that we can see there on camera?
Yeah, it is, Serge. Yeah, thanks for that. Obviously, everything's been put on hold for this footy season. We thought we might have got underway back in early July, and then we were going to go into the next phase of playing the games. But, of course, once Casey pulled out and then Gil McLaughlin got all the boys out of Melbourne up into the AFL hubs up there, I thought we were in trouble. And, yeah, this year we signed a deal with the CFMEU, and it's a ETU, and it's a 3-year deal. So we're very, very happy to have them on board, and they've been terrific in the early part of this season when we did have a little bit of time together. So, yeah, I think it's a good working class organisation with a good working class team like Port Melbourne. So, yeah, it's been a little bit difficult. I think I said to someone the other day, Serge, that it's been about 42 years, I think, since there's been no involvement for me at either VFL or AFL level. So if that's what retirement's about, mate, I don't want to retire, put it that way.
I've got to ask, Gary, with the CFMEU involved, I heard a rumour that they've been pushing next year for 15-minute quarter, no time on. double pay if you play in the last quarter.
Well, hopefully that's double pay for the coach, mate, Finey, and then I might be able to allow that, pal.
They look after their boys. I was just saying to you and Serge before we came on, and Rene, my son's become an engineering apprentice on the way to become, I guess, a fitter and turner first of all, and then maybe an engineer, and he's just joined the CFMEU.
And it's probably one of his jobs now, Finey. He'll take the CFMEU sponsorship money down to Port in brown paper bags. That's how they deliver it.
Well, whichever way it comes, you've got to be careful. Obviously, Scotty didn't like the fact that apparently there was a few brown paper bags flying around at Hawthorn in the 80s there.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah, that rubber, a few noses.
What have you got to say about that, Gaz?
To be honest, Finey, I was very, very surprised that Scotty had actually brought that up after all these years. And I know he's on that podcast with Sammy Newman and, of course, Mike Sheehan, so maybe there was a little bit of publicity for that. But I think back in the day, probably everyone was doing that sort of stuff.
Back then, people have to realise, Rene, you'd back me up here, the first couple of years of the salary cap and the draft were not, they were very much suggested ways of going about business. Most clubs paid no attention to the draft whatsoever. I remember St Kilda had the first pick one year, picked a guy called Michael Quirk, which was a good pick because he didn't like St Kilda and he never ever turned up and nobody cared. And that was the number one pick in the draft. Now, the salary cap, of course Hawthorn would be paying more than St Kilda, so they should be. Hawthorn had 25 players that could play in the St Kilda team. St Kilda had none, or maybe one, who could play in the Hawthorn team. So it took a while for it to become a realistic way of running football. Back then, it was, I reckon, a suggested an advised amount, not a serious one.
Yeah, we only have to look at Carlton, don't you, and the trouble they've got themselves into over a long period of time. And it all, of course, leaked out eventually as to certain players getting paid. So that was probably the real catalyst to clean it all up and go forward and make the game what it is today in terms of being transparent. So, yeah, it was very, very interesting. I remember when I went to Essendon and, I got looked after with a brown paper bag very well. So, it certainly did go on.
Well, you remember back those stories from the Richmond era, from probably going back even further than the new blokes that we're talking about. Back in the 70s, Graham Richmond would turn up with a handful of, Polaco business shirts and flowers for the player's mum, and that would often be enough to get the job over the line. You know,
that got Royce Hart.
Yeah, and then he flew to Tassie and wooed his mum and gave his dad some business shirts. Done deal. Not a bad deal.
He had another trick though, Graham Richmond. He had a much more effective trick. It was a beauty.
The worst part about it was, though, boys, there wasn't a lot of money flying around in that sort of late 70s and early 80s anyway, because we're all obviously part-time working, whether Rene was hairdressing or I remember working in an insurance job and building in-ground swimming pools, and it probably really wasn't until late 80s that you started earning a bit of coin. And again, at Hawthorn, the coin didn't really matter so much because you were quite keen on playing in a winning team, winning finals, and then hopefully playing premierships as well. So, and a lot of us got that wish, which is what we all did footy for, to be honest.
Yeah, I was just saying about Graham Richmond. This was another one. He famously did this, and I can't remember the player. There were a few recruits that required a bit of money to get their signature, and he went to one young fellow's house and he tipped a bag of crisp $20. You remember the old $20 paper notes and the $10 notes, and they were all on the table.
Reds and the blues, yeah.
and he said to the kid's father, he said, "Well, that's for you if the boy signs." And he goes, "Well, that's good." And then reached out and grabbed a handful, put it in his pocket. And he goes, "What are you doing?" And he goes, "I keep doing that till you sign, mate, so I'll do it rather quickly."
Yeah, they're great old stories, aren't they, if you come across them?
Or maybe just, as you talking about Hawthorn and the big money hadn't arrived yet, I remember Dermot, your old teammate Dermot Brereton has said it a few times that the first real issue he had with Hawthorn was that they wouldn't give him $30,000 a year, which is what he wanted. When you think now, you know, $30,000 is coins in the ashtray kind of thing, what players get now. You know.
Oh, definitely. And of course, back in our day, we're obviously young kids who, in some cases, come out of the under-19s and then, of course, doing a bit of apprenticeship time in the seconds. So there were guys like Don Scott, as we mentioned before, Lee Matthews, Cal Moore, Peter Knights, David O'Halloran, Calvin Moore, Michael Moncrief, you know, guys that had been at Hawthorn for quite some time. And I don't know what it's like at other clubs, but at Hawthorn it was sort of like stock standard that the captain got paid the most and whatever happened after that happened sort of thing. But, yeah, we didn't really worry too much about money, to be honest. It was about the chemistry, the camaraderie, and obviously the, I guess, want to be successful. And, lucky enough we were able to do that over a long period of time.
Well, when you named 7 or 8 players in a row, every one of them was a champion, a superstar. I mean, that was the sort of team that blokes like you were sort of the next generation, you and Brereton and Dunstall and Flatten and these guys. You came into that side. It must have been. Did you feel slightly overawed when you were playing with, you know, Lee Matthews and blokes like this, and then go, how do I actually fit into this team? Now, that was a star-studded lineup.
Oh, definitely, Serge. I came down as a 17-year-old kid. I know Rene was pretty young too. And when you looked in one corner, there was Don Scott, and we had a training camp down at HMA Cerberus. And anyway, he had to get out of bed at some ungodly time in the morning, about 5 o'clock, and it was freezing cold. And there was Scotty standing there in his budgie snugglers with his sand shoes on because we're going to go on a run. And I thought, this guy, he is off his brain. And we had practice matches. And, of course, when I played my first practice game, they were serious sort of stuff. Guys were having fisticuffs and banging into one another and all that sort of stuff. So we were, as you said, the next generation. You know, Tucky played in both those generations with those superstars. And then he came through as the captain after Lee, when Lee retired. And then we were lucky enough to get another probably 10 years out of Tucky almost. So, it was. But you're indoctrinated in the culture and the Hawthorn way, the way the Alan Jeans and Alan Joyce and these types of people in the administration. So I count myself very, very lucky that I was able to be part of that era for sure.
Absolutely.
There's a great story out of Hawthorn. It was a intra-club practice match, and I can't remember who the player was. Not a great player, And he got told, he looked at the team sheets and he saw he was playing on Matthews, and he went and complained to John Kenny. He said, mate, Kelvin's going to kill me, mate. He's a bloody, he's dangerous, that Kelvin. I'd rather not play him. And John goes, don't worry, it's his younger brother. It's a kid called Lee. and at half time, the guy went up to I think his name was Ross Bracon or something. He went up to Kennedy and said, put me on Kelvin.
Yeah, I actually played on Lee Matthews a couple of times in practice games when I was, I guess, going around as a back pocket then. And he certainly didn't play like a normal forward pocket, little rover. He would stand on your head. He would be lightning quick on the lead. He could turn just very, very sharply with those tree trunk thighs. And he ended up kicking, I think, 90 goals one year from full forward. Yeah. So that says about the quality.
I was just about to say, as you mean, we look back at Lee Matthews and again, wrong necessarily to compare eras, but back then he was your classic midfielder who then went to rest in a forward pocket, which they don't do anymore. But he would consistently kick 5 or 6 goals a week, sometimes 7 or 8, as a rover resting in the forward pocket. He was an absolute freak of nature.
I remember the first game one season. It was the early 70s. And I loved footy. I just loved every game. And I loved the start of a new season. And I reckon it was the first or second game because we were away at Warburton Chalet. And somebody said Lee Matthews has kicked 11 against Essendon or something at the start of the season. And I was only young. And I thought, my God, he's a rover. What's going on there? You remember Bomber Hendry, of course, Gary and Rene. You would have played against Bomber Hendry. Great bloke, Bomber.
A left footer, very, very good player.
Very skillful player.
Yeah, he taught me a great lesson, Bomber.
What's that, Finey?
I can't give the exact expression, but he said, always look for a girl that, if you're ever going out to a club or whatever, look for a girl who smokes cigarettes, because if they smoke cigarettes, then that's not all they do. Anyhow,
what a lot of bullshit that is.
Things have changed now. They do, there's other signposts. He goes, smokes, mate. Smokes and something else, but I won't say it. He used to say, when I played footy, Peter Hudson used to say, always keep both eyes on the ball, no matter where the ball is, even when it goes through the goals. And I said to him one day, you got to be kidding, mate. I keep one eye on the ball, one eye on that bastard Lee Matthews, because if he's not in front of me, if he's coming from behind me, I'm not 100% sure I'm going to be around for the rest of the game. He said he always kept an eye on Lee because he went so hard at the ball.
Yeah, sure. From a Collingwood point of view, I saw it all the time. He's probably one of my top 5 players, but I still put Phil Carman in as the best I've seen played with.
Yeah,
because he was so unique before his time, but he didn't have the consistency, of course, that Lee had. But that's you can say that about a lot of players.
He was a superstar, though, Phil Carman.
Yeah. He was very different, and.
But just from a football point of view, he was like a modern-day footballer. He was just a natural athlete as well as having every football skill known to man and better than most.
Here's something I don't get. I'd love to ask you two guys. Now, I saw this Isaac Kaynor do this, and I also saw one of these first gamers going around the other night last night for Brisbane, Ballenden, I think. Phil Carman had it. How can a player, and Hipwood has it, how come some players can pick the ball up 60 metres out and with no effort, it goes sailing through the post 3/4 high? Now, I mean, just some players have, and they're not always the biggest players, they have this timing and they can kick the ball a mile. It's great to see. I mean...
Finey, I know what it's all about. It's called ability.
Yeah. So
I think I might have done it myself once.
At the top, well, I was going to say both of you guys were great kicks as well. And I'm not talking about accuracy because you're both beautiful kicks, but also I'm talking about distance. All right, it is ability. Then how comes there are some guys that just play at the top level and can't kick?
Yeah, I think it's always timing and technique. I think, Finey, from what I sort of know about how you can actually make the ball go where you want it. I remember back in the sort of mid-70s, early 80s, there was a bloke playing for the Hawks and his name was Peter Manane. And Peter was a little left footer and used to sort of play wing, sort of half forward. And Peter was one of the longest kicks that I ever saw. And he was probably only about 5'8", 5'9", but when you looked at his technique, the drop of the ball, but also too his timing, that was what made the distance, I think, was technique and timing, to be honest. Whereas other guys have got a two-handed drop, or they drop it from a higher height. They don't have their heads sort of slightly over the ball. I know we're getting a little bit technical here, but I think you look at the good players of Dusty Martin, he's got a beautiful ball drop. He's got a head sort of slightly over the ball. He's bent forward ever so slightly, and he can kick left, right on the outside of his boot. And he's, the modern player that we love to go through the gates and watch and see.
Yeah,
was Benane number 41?
Peter Benane.
Yeah, 40.
I was going to say
20. Yeah.
No, that was Peter Knights.
Yeah, I can't remember, Finey. I can't remember. But, he was a beautiful left foot kick.
Yeah. See, I equate the players who can kick beautifully in distance and the timing very similar to. It's like if you watch Ernie Els swing a golf club, and if you stand behind him on the practice tee or at a tournament, and you watch Ernie Els, he barely seems to stroke the ball with any effort whatsoever, and it'll still fly 300 yards, which none of us could even dream of doing that, no matter how hard we hit the ball.
He could never do what I did at Cheltenham one day, Ernie Els, if he tried a million times.
What's that?
I teed off, and a mate of mine was standing behind the tee at backward point, and I hit him. I missed his agates by an inch. Like, he was really lucky. But I don't know how I cut it backward to a square. It was unbelievable.
The biggest problem with golf for me, boys, is I'm left-handed. So I play a lot of military golf, left, right, when I'm going down the fairway.
Yeah, I'm a lefty too, Gary. It's the same thing.
I'm a lefty. I play right-handed until I get around the green, and I chip left-handed out of bunkers, and I putt left-handed.
I've got a mate who does the exact same thing. He's a frustrating bloke to play golf with, put it that way.
Yeah,
well, I did see him playing up at Noosa Springs a few years back. He on a par 3 with lots of water. He has this thing that if you hit a ball into the drink, you use a new ball. You don't use an old one. He hit 7 in a row straight into the drink. And by the 6th new ball, we kept saying, mate, just use one of those shitty old ones down the bottom. No, I was sticking to it. 9 he put into the water before he put one on the putting surface. Ended up knocking it in for a lazy 21 for the hole. and about $80 worth of golf balls.
So finally, getting back to the football, what have you looked at tonight's 2 games?
Yep. Well, this is the worst. Isn't this the worst? Sergio, Melbourne, man. Isn't it the worst team for Melbourne to play now? They can't get anything. They can't get anything out of the game. They can't. If they win, everybody go, yeah, you just beat Adelaide.
Yeah.
But it's the greatest banana peel of all time. I mean, Gary, you probably don't know it because you played for Hawthorn, you coached Port, and you were coaching Geelong when they were pretty good too. But were you ever in a situation where there was a game that if you won it, it was like a big deal, and if you lost it, the world had come down around your ears? Because that's really where Simon Goodwin and the team is tonight.
Yeah, no, you're right, Finey. I probably had one of those games when I was actually coaching the Crows, to be honest.
The Crows, yeah.
We must have been the year, I think, 2004, and there was myself and Danny Frawley who were under the microscope as far as coaches go, and, of course, we were in a similar scenario or similar situation that whoever won it, okay, you just got breathing space for another week, and, of course, the press left you alone. Of course, then if you lost, well, yeah, it was really, that was going to be it. You were going to be sacked on the Monday, and you couldn't do anything right. And fortunately, we got the chockies that night, and I remember seeing Danny later, and I just felt so sorry for him because I thought, his next week or so is going to be an absolute misery. But yeah, not too many teams. I think if they make the amount of changes that the Crows have done tonight in 8, I don't think too many teams come back and win a game. So, yeah, Simon Goodwin's had the blowtorch lit under him this week from the president, and obviously the fact that they played so poorly. So, yeah, there's a fair bit riding on it, but it does make you feel slightly better, Finey, if you ever win, regardless.
Can I just jump in there, ask you, Gary, how did you feel about what's your take on the Melbourne president giving the players a real bagging? You agree with that, or is that a bit unkind?
No, I actually don't have a problem with it, to be honest, Rene. I think when you look at obviously his role, it is to be very much in the background. I don't know much about Bartlett myself, but it seems like he just gets and has all his faith in what the football department's doing. But let's be honest, he's in charge or has to oversee the members, the sponsors, and of course they wouldn't be too happy, I wouldn't have thought, with what was served up last week. It can happen, as we know, from time to time. But I think if he's going to say something, certainly get on the front foot, but only do it just the once, because then obviously I think it's not going to mean anywhere much. So, yeah, I didn't have too much of a problem with it, mate, to be honest. And
I would have liked to have seen him to address the players personally in the rooms.
Yep.
And keep it in-house and not sort of make it very public. I just felt that
via Zoom,
right.
Yeah, you would have had to do it soon.
Well, see, as a Melbourne supporter, it's good to have one of our leaders or major leader actually come out and show a bit of passion and a bit of anger. I think the club's been sort of too nice for too many years, and every time somebody in Melbourne goes, "Oh, now from now on we're going to be the hardest team in the league to play against. We're going to be this, we're going to be that," and they never do it. So I had no problem with Bartlett coming out and saying it. But I agree with you, Gary, is that he doesn't need to do it every second week now. Then the message gets lost and people get a bit sick of you, you know. Yeah.
And Finey, how do you think Reece Shaw's going at North Melbourne? He was a pin-up boy end of last year, going into this year, and he's hit a hurdle. So how do you see North Melbourne and where they're at with Geelong tonight, and where's Reece as a coach going forward?
Yeah, I tipped North Melbourne tonight. I'll tell you more in a moment. But interesting what he did last week, because he was obviously confident playing Adelaide that they could get a win, and he still wanted to make a bit of a statement. Pollock's numbers weren't bad, but obviously he'd done something that wasn't according to team rules. Probably kicked the ball, hit a target the way they were going. But you know, they won the game. Ben Brown, he said he needed a circuit breaker. I don't know, is circuit breaker the modern term for a disposal? Because what he needs to do is touch the ball. He doesn't need to break circuits. Anyhow, he gets a chance. Larky's out. Now, Geelong are quite inconsistent, I feel, and they've got a bit of a history in recent years, of playing well in big games and getting caught on the other side of big games. Now, they played a great game against West Coast, and that, I reckon, was almost the best game of the year, and with the crowd, almost the biggest. And then only a handful of days later, they've got to fly and build themselves up for North, who would love to get some sort of foothold with a win here. And just Geelong's history of doing great, really building up for big games and letting it slip the week after might come to play. I don't know. They should win, but I've tipped North. What do you guys reckon? What do you reckon, Rene?
North is an interesting tip to go with. Their form last week, their last win was fantastic. They did a great job. But look, I don't know, Geelong was just sensational and probably could have won the game with a couple of easy shots they missed. So I would go for Geelong definitely to beat North Melbourne tonight.
Yeah, I'd be the same as Rene. I'd go Geelong. And I would go. I think that's always something that the good teams are very good, but they need their inspirational leaders and the players that step up, and Joel Selwood's been one of those. I think with the North Melbourne one and Ben Brown, again, we don't know what's going on within the four walls, and we're not involved 24/7, and even more so now with the hubs as well. But it seems a bit of a strange selection with picking Ben Brown after just being out for 1 week. So I know he likes, it seems like to me anyway, Rene, that he likes a particularly tall structure going forward, and he likes a like for a like when he's selecting and obviously demoting players. So I found that a little bit strange, and I know poor old Ben looks like he's had a fair bit going off the field as well, and we wish him all the best with those things that are going on. So, but I would have probably thought, no, they've got some momentum. They've had a different look forward line. Why not take that in and see if you can actually do it a second time around rather than just doing it the first time?
I'm going to ask you this, Serge. Davis Uniacke, and he was good last week.
Yeah.
Has only played 2 games this year, and he's not playing tonight. It says managed. I reckon the word's mismanaged. Why would a young bloke who's just played 2 games and hit really nice form last week need this week need to have tonight off?
The only thing I can think of there, Finey, is the management is to do with the injury he had is to the reason why he only played 2 games. He went down sort of late in the pre-season in what I think looked like possibly being a season-ending injury, but he came back earlier. All I can think of is he might have a little bit of a twinge, and they've managed him that way. But you're right, though. His form last week has probably been the best it's been, and he's a talented young player, and he's the sort of young player you want to get games into rather than managing him off the field. You know what I mean? But I just reckon it must be a niggle from an injury.
Now, Rene, I've got to ask you about Collingwood. They have...
Well, Collingwood, Sydney, of course, Thursday night.
I want to say it. It's too much fun not to say it. They are going shithouse. I enjoyed that.
I told you, no Cox, no Collingwood.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Oh, they've got a few Cox down there. Don't worry about that.
He's going to Port Melbourne next year. They definitely want him there.
We'll have him down there, Rene. He took us apart one day. I reckon he took about 12 or 13 contested marks. So
we didn't have anyone on him. That's fair enough.
No, we didn't have anyone. That was about 210.
Collingwood, Sydney tomorrow night. Sydney are going pretty ordinary this year. Buddy Franklin being out, of course, hasn't helped their game plan. Look, we have to really make amends against them tomorrow night. Otherwise, if we can't win that, we've got 3 reasonably easy games ahead of us. So if we can't come home tomorrow with Sydney on the plate, we're in real trouble. So, look, I certainly believe that we can beat them. We've had a tough gig because we've been to Perth, we're back to Queensland, Adelaide, and then, of course, back to Queensland again. So we're all over the place as far as this hub's concerned. It might take a slight telling toll on them, but we really need to kick goals and win games.
And Gary, I'd just love to be able to ask you this because it's probably 10 years since I could ask this question, but St Kilda look like a real finals prospect. And actually, they've got I'll say this, they've got a good team with a good bit of depth in it, and they've recruited well. How do you see the rest of the year panning out for them? Given that it's an extraordinary year, how do you reckon they're tracking?
Oh, I think they're tracking pretty well, Finey, to be honest. And there's a fair bit about the man in charge too, in Brett Ratton. He's obviously been, I think, fairly harshly dealt with, as we probably would have seen at Carlton. Then he's just, and again, I don't know him all that well, but he went to Hawthorn and plied his trade there under the master coach in Alistair Clarkson. And, of course, then he got another opportunity at St Kilda. And he just, I think, has brought a breath of fresh air in with his positivity. It looks like his communication and the relationships that you see that he's building with the players are first class. And they identified specific needs. Sometimes, I guess, bringing that type of high calibre player into a club can maybe upset the chemistry, but they look like they're getting better and better. I think the ruck combination with Marshall and Ryder. Ryder's excellent from a stoppage point of view, especially at the centre bounce. And Marshall's basically like his understudying, I guess, and he's pretty good around the forward line and general ground stuff. So I think St Kilda, if they can hold it together, they've actually added a fair bit of pace too, which they probably were a little bit slow. Someone like Jaron Geary's become more of a lockdown sort of high forward now rather than actually coming out of defence. So I think Rats has been amazing, to be honest. They did lose those 2 games to, who was it, North Melbourne and Freo, after probably being in front. But certainly at the minute, I'd think whether they can obviously win a grand final, that's, again, the unknown. But I think every club this year we've said that they could be premiership favourites, and then they've dropped 2 or 3 games. So I think this hub business must be pretty tough. But then again, Rene had remembered too, we were playing 3 games a week back in the day when they used to have the night games in the middle of the year. So we'd play Saturday, Tuesday and Saturday, and then there were state games. So it was pretty tough on the old boys then, but we just got on and did it, and we weren't even full-time, were we, Rene?
No, correct, Gary. Look, with St Kilda, I like so much about them, and the only disappointment I've got with them at the moment is, can they kick enough goals to win enough games consistently? And I'm looking forward to King, whatever his first name is.
Yeah, Max.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to improving, and if he can really improve on the forward line and give them a target, I think the rest can follow. But they still need just to build that forward line a bit stronger to be able to kick more goals to win games that are going to be very crucial going towards the end of the year.
I'll tell you this, Gary, the team actually has 2, well, maybe even more. I can go through this. VFL players, right? St Kilda picked up Nick Hine from Essendon in the VFL. Now, an absolute ripper. Ben Long came through the VFL with Footscray. I think Rowan Marshall might have come from North Ballarat.
Yep.
We're talking about the players that are really making a difference for St Kilda.
Oh, absolutely, Finey. And the other one too has been the 2 young kids that have impressed me, Caulfield and Hunter Clark as well.
Yeah.
I think they show wonderful poise, and they've both got pretty good skills. And guys that they've picked up, as you said, from other clubs, Battle came from, where was he, GWS, I think, and he's added a little bit of another dimension to their forward line, being another bigger body.
Well, Steele's from GWS, as you know, he's a ripper.
Yeah, he is, and that was that pace that I mentioned previously with Hind, and I saw him playing for Essendon when we played him in the VFL, and he certainly impressed me. He had a little bit of go about him. He didn't mind taking the opposition on, and when you're a young bloke, that's what the coach should be doing, is giving these younger guys confidence to actually play to their strengths, play to their natural game, and just give them their head, if you like, to be able to do that, because, it could be just, God, how fast St Kilda. You don't know how good you can or can't be, and I think that's the attitude that Ratton's taken with St Kilda as well.
You bet. Now, guys, before we do knock off, I was wondering if you've seen any cricket since it's come back, because I have seen the most extraordinary cricketer I have ever seen in my life playing Test cricket for the West Indies. Have any of you laid eyes on Rakeem Cornwall?
How could you miss him?
Is he the one that fields in first slip, second slip and third slip? Is that right?
Well, anybody that's ever played park cricket has played with a bloke that they reckon used to be a good spinner, but he can only walk up 3 paces, he bowls it, and then you've got no idea where to put him in the field. For people who don't know, Rakeem's the heaviest cricketer ever. He played one game, they reckon he's over 140 kilos. I mean, he's 6'6", but he's played at about 145 or 150. Then they said, has he lost weight? Has he gone on a diet because he's lost 6 or 7 kilos? They said, no, he's just had a shit. He's just he could lose 6 kilos in the toilet. This bloke is the least. Of any sportsman I've ever seen, I got a shock when I saw him, because the first time I saw him, he was fielding. And he was fielding down a fine leg, and he sort of did 3 short steps to get the ball, and it came to him, and he thought, no, if I bend over, I'm going to rip my pants or something. And he just watched it go to the boundary.
But he did take a good catch at first slip in that last match against England.
Yeah, so did the bloke for Bermuda, mate, but that's a one-off. Remember Dwayne Leverock?
Yeah. He also reminds me, Rakeem, of the... And you see him at every suburban footy club, has a bloke who looks like that, who plays full forward in the seconds or thirds.
Yeah, and you know what number they always give that bloke?
Hey?
You know what number they always give that bloke?
Yeah.
Do you know what number he wears? What jumper number? Number 11. And you know why? So they can call him brackets.
Okay, we got another game. One more game to wrap up. One more game to wrap up, Steve. Essendon versus GWS. How are we looking there? Friday night.
You'd have to back GWS here, Rene. Essendon are just too flaky for mine. And the Giants haven't been as good as they should have been lately for all their talent, but I still think they'll be too good for Essendon.
Yeah, they should take care of them, shouldn't
they? Yeah, they should.
Yeah. They do struggle without Green, though.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
He is their key now, isn't he, Toby Green?
Definitely.
I mean, he is the barometer, if you want to use that old cliche, down at GWS. He's a fantastic footballer, Toby Green.
Finey, this time of the year, my top 5 going into the second part of the year, very, very keen to probably see West Coast on top, Port Adelaide second, Richmond maybe third, Brisbane finishing fourth, and St Kilda fifth. That's how I see it at the moment.
You know what, Rene? Now, hold on. You're not standing up, are you? I don't want you to fall over.
No.
You know we haven't had a top 5 since the late 90s or something. And you know we go with a top 8 now.
Apparently you do, but I'm not interested in the rest of them because they couldn't be to fly up a wall.
Well, the next 3 sides, very, very hard to pick anyway.
Well, you want me to put Collingwood in? You're joking, aren't you?
Well, Footscray, I call them Footscray still. Bulldogs, they're just disappointed a bit. Look, they were okay against Port Adelaide, but
they haven't beaten anyone, Mark, honestly.
No, I agree. I think that they're being disappointing. GWS are mounting something. Essendon, no. Geelong. You never count them out. Now they've added Selwood, Stephen, and Stanley back into the team. That's not a bad inclusion, Gary. A lot of people say Geelong, and I'm one of them, get not assist. They absolutely deserve this. More power to them. But they probably get a couple of wins more a year out of playing at Cardinia Park.
Yeah.
Without that, do you think that they can make a serious challenge without that sort of home base as a bit of a refuge?
Yeah.
Yeah, I do think so, Finey. I think they've got some really good young kids too, and we see a lot of those boys in the VFL, obviously, but I think Parfitt's a pretty handy young kid coming in for them. I think young Simpson as well. And what Chris Scott's been able to do too is he's kept that team pretty much in the top 4 now for, the best part of probably 9 or 10 years. And he probably needs an ounce of luck, I guess, with a couple of things. And Tommy Hawkins probably cost him dearly last year when he got suspended. Was that in the semi-final? I can't quite remember, or maybe didn't play in the prelim from memory. So, yeah, I think they'll be thereabouts. And it's probably really the last swan song for a few of those boys, I guess. Unsure about Gazza Ablett, obviously Harry Taylor and those sorts of boys. So, yeah, I reckon they'll be somewhere thereabouts. Whether they'd be good enough, not sure. I think Port Adelaide, to me, seem to be the most consistent team going around. And, geez, after what Richmond did last night to Brisbane too, and they've got a lot of really top-end talent out, I don't think you discount them either.
I'll tell you now, Gary, I'd beat Harry Taylor over 100 now. He is slow as treacle. He's got the best superannuation payday coming of all time.
Yeah, I guess we wish we were still playing, mate, now.
Oh, please.
Hey, Serge, remember that band Jethro Tull?
Yeah.
I do, yeah. I
think there's a brick. Is it Cameron Guthrie? Is he going for Ian Anderson's job as lead singer there? Sort of that or Catweasel?
Can you see him playing the flute while standing on one leg?
Gary, you're talking about playing football now. I'd have Incredible Hulk Astros on motorbikes. I'm telling you. I'd brain them.
He took a beautiful mark last week and he thought, I'm off to the races here. I've just taken a great mark.
Yeah.
He got done for holding the ball, didn't he?
Yes, he did. Pretty crucial time too.
It was.
Well, I reckon we're coming to the end of the program. Yeah. It's we got given a brief, boys. You know what the brief was? Don't drop out. Don't lose your connection. Don't drop out. And the main thing, don't have any family member walking behind us with no gear on. So I
think we've answered all those questions. Yeah. Correct.
Ticked all the right boxes.
So,
all right, well, we can sit back tonight and watch a couple of footy games.
We shall.
Good on you, boys.
There's footy to be watched. Thanks a lot, Gary Ayres, Rene Kink, Sergio Paradise. My name's not important, but the show is. It's Takeover's Footy Wrap, and we'll be back next Wednesday to do it all over again.
Thanks, guys.
On you, boys.